The morning air was brisk, carrying with it the promise of an early fall as I stood outside the cafe. My breath formed small clouds of mist as I waited, the anticipation tightening my chest with each passing minute. It had been exactly 4 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days since I last saw Emily, but who was counting? Today marked our first encounter since the unraveling of our shared dreams, since the day betrayal had crept into our marriage like an unwelcome shadow. As she rounded the corner, I caught sight of her. Emily, with her chestnut hair catching the sun's rays, casting a warm glow that contrasted sharply with the coldness that had settled between us. I noticed the slight tremble in her steps, a visible sign of her nervousness, mirroring the unease that churned within me. Despite the turmoil, I summoned a smile, a peace offering in the silent battlefield of our broken relationship. "Hello, Emily," I greeted, my voice betraying none of the storm of emotions inside me. She looked up, her eyes briefly meeting mine before darting away, a small, uncertain smile playing on her lips. "Hi, James," she replied, her voice a whisper carried away by the breeze. It's good to see you." We stepped into the cafe together, the warm interior enveloping us like a comforting embrace. The familiar scent of coffee and freshly baked pastries filled my senses, a stark reminder of the countless mornings we had shared in places just like this one. I had arranged for us to meet Shawn, an old friend and former tournament companion, who was already seated at a table by the window. His presence was both a comfort and a necessity, a silent witness to the conversation that was about to unfold. "Emily, this is Shawn," I introduced, gesturing towards the man who had once stood by my side through countless battles on the chessboard. "Shawn, this is Emily, my soon-to-be ex-wife." "Nice to meet you, Emily," Shawn said, offering a polite nod. His calm demeanor provided a stark contrast to the tension that hung in the air. "The pleasure is mine," Emily responded, though her eyes flickered with a hint of confusion at his presence. I explained, keeping my voice even. "Shawn and we've lost touch over the years. But recently, we reconnected, due to certain circumstances that required his attention." Emily's gaze shifted between Shawn and me, a silent question in her eyes. I could tell she was piecing together the puzzle, wondering what role Shawn played in the narrative of our separation. "Look, Emily," I started, the words heavy on my tongue. "I know you've mentioned wanting to remain friends after everything. And part of me wants to believe that's possible. But there's a lot of hurt, a lot of anger still there." "I understand, James. And I'm sorry, truly sorry for how things turned out," Emily interjected, her voice laced with genuine remorse. I raised my hand, stopping her mid-apology. "Let's not delve into the past, not today. It won't change what happened, and it certainly won't make this any easier." Emily nodded, a silent agreement to the unspoken truce. As we settled into an uneasy conversation about the mundane aspects of our lives since the split, I couldn't help but feel the weight of Shawn's silent observation. He was here for a reason, one that Emily was yet to discover. The meeting was just beginning, but the journey towards understanding and closure was far from over. As the initial awkwardness of our greeting faded, replaced by the ambient noise of the cafe, I found myself grappling with a mix of emotions. The sight of Emily, looking both familiar and estranged, stirred memories I had fought hard to compartmentalize. We navigated the initial pleasantries with the caution of diplomats, each word measured, each sentence weighed for its potential impact. "I've been meaning to reach out," Emily began, her voice stronger now, but still tinged with uncertainty. I wasn't sure if you were ready to talk." I stirred my coffee, watching the swirls blend into a dark abyss. "Honestly, I'm not sure either. But here we are," I said, looking up to meet her gaze. "I guess part of me needs to understand why, Emily. Why you felt the need to step outside our marriage." Emily flinched as if the words were physical blows. "James, I've asked myself that question every day," she admitted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And I still don't have a clear answer. It was a series of bad decisions, not just one moment. And I regret them deeply." Her apology hung between us, sincere yet insufficient to bridge the chasm her actions had created. I nodded, acknowledging her words but unable to fully accept them. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too raw. "We've lost friends over this," I pointed out, shifting the conversation away from the emotional landmine. "People chose sides, and it seems like we ended up alone in the aftermath." Emily sighed, a sound of resignation. "I know. And my family, they've been less than supportive. They don't understand, and they'd blame me for everything that happened." The bitterness in her voice caught me off guard. It was a reminder that the fallout of her choices extended beyond our shattered relationship. "I'm sorry to hear that, Emily. Despite everything, I wouldn't wish that on you." A moment of silence passed between us, filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of our shared pain. It was then I decided to steer the conversation towards the reason Shawn was sitting with us, though I remained vague. "You know, I ran into Shawn's wife recently," I mentioned casually, watching her reaction closely. It was quite the coincidence, considering I hadn't seen Shawn in years until today. Emily's interest was piqued, her earlier remorse momentarily forgotten. "Really? How is she? I remember you mentioning Shawn and his wife a few times." "She's been better," I replied cryptically, exchanging a glance with Shawn, who had remained silent up to this point. His stoic expression gave nothing away, but I knew the storm that brewed beneath the surface. The conversation drifted to safer topics after that, a mutual but unspoken agreement to avoid further emotional landmines. Yet, the undercurrent of tension remained, a constant reminder of the fractures in our relationship and the secrets yet to be revealed. The cafe's atmosphere, once a comforting backdrop, now seemed to amplify the tension seated at our table. Shawn's silence, an enigmatic presence throughout our meeting, began to draw Emily's curiosity. His stoicism was a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil that had passed between Emily and me. It was a silence filled with unspoken words, a story yet to be told. Emily, perhaps sensing the shift in dynamics, turned her attention to Shawn. "You've been awfully quiet," she observed, her tone a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Is there something on your mind?" Shawn met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "I've been listening," he started, his voice steady and calm. "It's a lot to take in, seeing two people I care about in so much pain." His words, though spoken softly, carried a weight that seemed to press down on us. I watched Emily closely, wondering how she would respond to Shawn's implied concern. "I appreciate that, Shawn," she replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "But I can't help feeling like there's more to your presence here today. James mentioned running into your wife recently. Is there something I should know?" Shawn glanced at me, a silent question in his eyes. I nodded slightly, giving him the unspoken go-ahead to reveal the truth that had been looming over us like a dark cloud. "Emily," Shawn began, his voice taking on a somber tone. "The reason I'm here isn't just as a friend to James. It's also personal. My wife, Miranda. She was the person you met with that day. The one you didn't think anyone would know about." The air seemed to still around us, the bustling noise of the cafe fading into the background. Emily's face drained of color, her eyes widening in shock as the implications of Shawn's words sank in. "You mean," Emily started, her voice barely a whisper, "you're saying that I—" "Yes," Shawn interjected, his tone firm yet not unkind. "Miranda was the other woman. My wife." The revelation hung between us, a palpable force that seemed to push us further apart. Emily looked from Shawn to me, her expression a mixture of confusion, guilt, and sorrow. "I had no idea," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I never would have, if I had known." Shawn raised a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "I know, and I don't believe you did it with the intention to hurt anyone. But the fact remains it happened, and it's something we're all going to have to live with." The conversation that followed was difficult, filled with uncomfortable truths and painful admissions. Shawn shared the impact of Emily's actions on his marriage, the trust that had been broken, and the long, challenging road to forgiveness and healing he and Miranda were still navigating. Emily listened, tears streaming down her face as the magnitude of her choices became painfully clear. She offered apologies, though she knew they could never undo the hurt caused. And I, caught between my own pain and the revelations of the day, found myself grappling with a complex mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, and an unexpected surge of empathy for the unintended consequences of Emily's actions. As the meeting drew to a close, we stood, the air between us charged with a new understanding. The path forward was uncertain, the damage done not easily mended. But in the raw honesty of our conversation, there was a glimmer of hope, however faint, for healing and forgiveness. "Thank you, Shawn, for being honest with me," Emily said, her voice steady despite the tears. "And James, I'm so sorry. For everything." I nodded, the words too heavy to speak. We parted ways outside the cafe, each of us stepping into the cool embrace of the morning, the first steps taken on a long journey towards reconciliation and healing. The days following our cafe encounter were filled with a heavy silence. Each of us had returned to our separate lives, left to process the revelations and the uncomfortable truths that had surfaced. For me, the knowledge that Emily's affair had entangled not just any couple, but our friends Shawn and Miranda, added layers to the betrayal I hadn't anticipated. It was a wound upon a wound, a betrayal that felt both personal and expansive. It wasn't until a week later that Emily reached out again, her voice a mix of determination and vulnerability over the phone. "James, can we meet? There's something I need to show you. Something that might explain, not excuse, but explain some things." Curiosity and a lingering sense of obligation propelled me to agree. We met at a quiet park, the autumn leaves painting the ground in hues of gold and crimson, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within. As I approached, Emily handed me an envelope, her hands trembling. "I found these after our talk," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Letters from Miranda to me, but I never received them. They were hidden, tucked away in a place I rarely checked." I took the envelope, my fingers brushing against hers, noticing the stark coldness of her skin. Opening it, I found several letters, each sealed and marked with dates stretching back over the past year. My heart raced as I broke the seal of the first letter, unfolding the paper to reveal Miranda's neat handwriting. Emily watched me anxiously as I read, her eyes searching mine for any sign of understanding or forgiveness. The letter was a confession, an apology from Miranda for the affair, an explanation of her own turmoil and loneliness, and a plea for Emily to step back, to allow them to repair the damage in their marriage. Each subsequent letter echoed the sentiments, growing increasingly desperate and heartfelt. I had no idea," I stammered, looking up from the letters. "Why didn't she tell Shawn? Or confront you directly?" Emily shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "I don't know. Fear, maybe. Or maybe she thought reaching out to me directly would somehow make a difference." We sat on a nearby bench, the fallen leaves around us a testament to things once vibrant now faded. "This changes things," I said slowly, the weight of the situation settling in. "Not everything, but it adds context." Emily nodded, wiping away a tear. "I know I've made unforgivable mistakes, James, but reading Miranda's words, it's made me realize the depth of my selfishness, and the pain I've caused, not just to you, but to them as well." There was a pause, a moment of shared grief for all that had been lost. Then, Emily spoke again, her voice firmer. "I want to make amends, James. Not just with you, but with Shawn and Miranda. I owe them that much." The sincerity in her voice was palpable, and for the first time since the revelation, I felt a flicker of hope. Not for our marriage, that ship had sailed, but for healing, for all of us. "Let's start with honesty," I suggested, the idea forming as I spoke. "Complete transparency from here on out. It's the only way any of us can begin to move forward." Emily agreed, and we spent the next hour discussing our next steps. It was the beginning of a long and uncertain journey, but armed with the truth, We were finally taking the first steps toward healing and redemption. As we parted ways that day, the autumn air felt a little less heavy, the path ahead a little less daunting. The road to forgiveness was long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time, it seemed possible that we might, one day, find our way to the other side. The weeks that followed were a testament to the complexity of human emotions and the capacity for change. Emily's decision to reach out to Shawn and Miranda, to offer her apologies and seek their forgiveness, was a pivotal moment for all involved. It was a gesture that, while not erasing the past, paved the way for a future where healing could begin. For me, this period was marked by deep reflection. The revelations and the subsequent decisions made by Emily and me had set in motion a series of events that were both painful and transformative. It was during one of these reflective moments that I found myself walking along the riverbank, the water's steady flow a soothing companion to my tumultuous thoughts. As I walked, I heard footsteps approaching, and I turned to see Shawn. There was a moment of hesitation before we both nodded, the unspoken acknowledgement of our shared journey enough to bridge any awkwardness. "James," Shawn started, his voice carrying a note of weariness that I recognized all too well. "I wanted to find you, to talk." I nodded, gesturing for him to join me on the walk. The silence between us was comfortable, two souls weathered by similar storms finding solace in the company of the other. After a few minutes, Shawn spoke again. Emily came to us, to Miranda and me. She was sincere. "It's going to take time, a lot of it, but I think we might find a way to forgive eventually." The honesty in his voice struck a chord within me. "I'm glad," I replied, the words feeling inadequate to express the depth of my emotions. Forgiveness. It's a powerful thing. Not easy, but powerful. Shawn nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Miranda and we've decided to take a step back, to give ourselves the space to heal. It's going to be a long road, but we're committed to walking it together." The resilience in his voice was inspiring, a reminder of the strength that lies in the decision to rebuild, even from the ashes of despair. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "And I've realized sometimes love isn't enough. Not when the foundation has crumbled." Shawn looked at me, his eyes reflecting a mixture of understanding and sorrow. "It's a hard lesson to learn, but sometimes letting go is the only way to move forward." We reached a point where the river curved, the path diverging in two directions. It felt symbolic, a representation of the crossroads at which we found ourselves. "I guess this is where we part ways," I said, offering Shawn a small, sad smile. "For now," Shawn replied, clasping my shoulder in a gesture of camaraderie. "But who knows what the future holds?" We exchanged farewells, each of us turning to walk our separate paths, the sound of the river a constant companion in our journey towards healing and redemption. As I walked away, I'd allowed myself to look back once, Shawn's figure a solitary silhouette against the setting sun. It was a moment of poignant beauty, a farewell not just to a friend, but to a chapter in our lives that had irrevocably changed us. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and the potential for new beginnings. But as I walked on, the weight of the past began to lift, replaced by a cautious optimism for the future. In the end, reflections and farewells were not just an ending, but a doorway to new possibilities, a chance to rebuild on foundations of honesty, forgiveness, and hope.